If you are thinking about building a personal brand or starting one for the first time in 2025, then this episode and this series is going to break down everything that you need to possibly know about getting started. I'm going to talk about all the best strategies. I'm going to talk about setting the right foundations. I'm going to be talking about the best practices and even going into the specific details of how to lay out your entire system and fulfillment and engines and processes, so that when you actually start doing this, you know exactly what to expect, what is going to happen, and how to get the results that's actually going to make you grow. I'm ready for this. I am pumped. So with that being said, let's jump right in. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Remy and I run a professional social media firm that helps 7, 8, and 9-figure founders scale their personal brands online organically. I get paid to work with some of the most successful founders in the world, and because of that, I get to share everything that I am learning with you for free. So far, I've generated over 50 million views, 240,000 followers, 10,000 leads, and over $1 million in revenue for my clients and myself. This is a no BS podcast, okay? There is no gatekeeping here. Founders want to work with me, they can reach out and get my services, but I'm not desperate for anybody. I am super content with the people that I get to work with, but this is a great opportunity for me to help share these things with you, because what my intention is that I want to get on stage, I want to meet more founders, I want to help more people, and I want to build a personal brand to showcase that I am a leader in this industry, and that comes through long-form content like this. So to your benefit, I share all the secrets, and to my benefit, I get to build awareness around what I get to do and to become a leader in this industry. So what this breakdown is going to look like is, my original intention was to do this all into one episode. And when I actually started recording this, I got about 45 minutes of the way through just on stage one, and I realized that this is going to be a 3-hour episode and that no one has the time to commit to that at one go. And so it makes more sense to me, and it makes more sense to you probably, that I break this up into a series of episodes that you can watch back to back to back, that goes through each of them, and it goes so much more in depth. I hate short podcasts that try to give you all of the, the most important things, or let me just summarize it for you, because it misses the nuance. It misses the elements that you don't think about. And I spend years listening to those types of podcasts only to get nowhere with how to actually grow on social media and to build a presence. And so for this, I wanted to make sure that I was thorough, that I spent a ton of time on this, and this took me weeks to prep this. And so it only makes sense that this would be a 5-episode series, because the amount of work that I put into this is the equivalent of like a month's worth of podcast content. And so I hope that you take this seriously. I hope that you listen to each of them independently and all the way through, because each of them is equally important. If you skip any of these stages, especially the first one, which is today's episode, which is the why, and you just try to jump right in, I guarantee you're going to waste a lot of money, a lot of time, you're going to experience a lot of frustration, and you're going to have so many of the wrong expectations going into building a personal brand that at the end of the day, you might just question whether or not it was even worth it in the first place. And I don't want you to experience any of that. So today, make sure you're intentional with listening to the why and knowing how to set the right foundation. And I hope that you enjoyed this series. I hope that it is beneficial for you, and that you get to learn a lot through that. And that if you are a founder and you realize after all of this that it's just not worth doing the individual approach where you do it yourself or building your internal team, that I can be of service to you into helping you do this. With that being said, let's start with step 1, which is going to be why. This is all about setting your foundation. Simon Sinek is one of my favorite authors. Start with Why, incredible book. He talks about the principle of just knowing your why in general, and that if you know your why, you can endure any how or any what. And if you're trying to build a personal brand, you need to be super honest with yourself about why you want to do this, right? Like most of you might be coming to this podcast or listening to this episode, or just in general thinking about building a personal brand because that's what everybody else is doing. That's what the number one strategy is out there. That's what all of your buddies are recommending. It's what other founders are recommending. That's what your friends are doing, right? Like it seems like everybody is all in on this personal brand thing right now, and you probably wonder why. And you kind of have an idea, right? Like there's a lot of hype around this concept. A lot of personal brands that were more like creators before, they just did YouTube, they just made videos, they did it for fun. Now they're starting to launch their own products. They're getting into CPGs. They are partnering with other companies and getting equity in them. And all of a sudden, these companies are shooting up out of nowhere and they're taking market share, right? Like Logan Paul and Prime have taken like a huge leap in the CPG space for drinks. And then you got Mr. Beast, who came out here and started doing chocolate and now is all of a sudden posing a threat to other companies that thought that they were fine, right? Like it can be an overnight, quote, overnight sensation or overnight success for a lot of these people, but it's because they've spent years developing a personal brand and building trust with an audience that then they can turn around and then monetize and blow up with. So some of you might be interested in starting a personal brand for monetary reasons. It could be for just wanting to build an audience. It could be because you feel pressured to do it. You maybe feel like you have to keep up. There's a lot of different things. So here's a few questions that you can ask yourself. Number one, is it to make yourself more money? This is probably the most common one that I hear. Usually because obviously we want to make money and we all think that we're good saints and Samaritans. But at the end of the day, like if you're trying to provide for your family or you have other ambitions and things you want to do, it's an incredible way to monetize. And that's just the natural flow of how I think the economy is shifting towards today and consumers and the relationship that they have to brands. Another question, is it to build awareness around something? So maybe this is for organizations or nonprofits. We work with some churches, and for them, it's not necessarily about making money, but it's about building awareness around who they are and creating an invitation for them to come get involved or maybe to donate or to any of those things that they desire. But it's not usually about making money, it's about something else. Those are more like the good Samaritans and the saints. Is it to network? This is another one that's super common, right? Like social leverage is an actual thing, or social currency is another way to put it. But in general, if you have built a pretty big brand and you have connections and you start reaching out in DMs and you start finding ways to build out your network, it works super well. We've seen it with our founders and they've made some pretty massive connections through building up their personal brands. Another one, is it to test ideas? Are you just doing this because you have a bunch of ideas for maybe the next brand you want to do, the next product you want to drop, any of that kind of stuff, and you just kind of want to test the market and you want to do it organically? You don't want to have to put a bunch of ads behind it, but you want to see what messages are resonating and where people are at. This one isn't as common, but it can be one. Another one, is it to become an industry leader or prove that you already are? Some of the clients that I work with are literally industry leaders for the spaces that they're in. But the problem is that they don't have a presence on social media. And so for anybody who does any kind of, like discovery or is doing some due diligence and trying to look up who you are, and they don't see anything on socials that really screams that you're a professional, that you're an industry leader, it can backfire, right? And it can degrade any of the trust that they might have built with you. For instance, we're building my a social media for Kings right now. It's a brand new account. We just started doing content for it. And so we're working through it. And my personal brand has about 10,000 followers. Been working on that one as well because I want to be a great case study for my own stuff. But in general, I only have 60, 70 followers as we've just started this out. And I'm the type that's super patient about it, right? Like I'm okay with playing the long game and making sure that the quality of the content is great and making sure people know who I am. But if someone sees that I have all these stats and I've done these incredible things and they see that I have 60 followers, it might actually really hurt my conversions because people might feel like there's something shady going on here. This guy only has 60 followers, but he says that he's generated hundreds of thousands for his clients. I don't know. And that's just the reality of it. And so if you're someone who's an industry leader in a space and you're kind of like, man, people just aren't taking me seriously online, then maybe that is the reason why you want to go and build a personal brand, is simply to make sure that across the board, when you go to speak at conferences or you do masterminds or you're consulting, that everything lines up, that there's no weird gaps in your ability to show the public that you are an industry leader. Next question, is it from a forced hand in order to keep up with competition? Kind of like we talked about, right? Like everybody else seems to be doing this. All of a sudden, it seems like this is the number one strategy for how to build your brand, or to just go into like founder brand mode where you basically have to do this in order to compete with all the other competitors that are rising and doing the personal brand side of it. So for instance, Dan Coe is an incredible personal brand and he's been doing it for years. And they've launched a product recently called Cortex, which is like a competitor to Notion. And I guarantee you that over time, he's going to take a percentage of that market share that Notion has because he has millions of followers and are people that use Notion through the things that he was doing before, but now he's coming out with his own version. And so it could literally be overnight that all of a sudden your company is struggling because someone else decides to launch their product on on Tuesday, and all of a sudden your sales are down or your retention gets worse or attrition or any of those things, right? So maybe it's a forced hand that you have to deal with. All right, next question is it a desire to future-proof yourself? So this is another big one. And by the way, I want you to consider all these things. It's so important to consider all the different angles for where personal branding can take you and what you can accomplish. So make sure you're super thorough on this and answer each of these questions honestly. When it comes to future-proofing yourself, it's just thinking about what are ways that if anything were to happen with my business, let's say it shuts down, let's say that I decide to move on from it, what is the next step in my life? What is the next stage? What is the next venture that I want to take? And as an entrepreneur and a founder, we want to do a lot of things. And when you have a personal brand where you have 10, 20, 30, 50, 100, 500,000, a million followers, the more you have and the greater the list that you build, the more you future-proof yourself. Because at any point in time, you can drop a product, you can launch a new service, you have the network, you have the connections, you have everything. And so when you go on a campaign for, like brand awareness and you're trying to like launch this new thing, it's a lot easier to do because you've built those connections over time. So in a simple way, like you do future-proof yourself in general, but is that your desire and your core motivation for doing this? Another question, is this simply to help people out through another channel? This is more the Good Samaritan route. This is for people that I think that truly don't have any strings attached, that really just want to help people out. It is possible and it can happen. And maybe you do have that desire and you want to help people. If you're not financially motivated, but you want to help, then that's a great thing. And you can totally make that happen. I don't see it as common. It's not something that I typically see a lot of, but I'm not going to pretend like there's only financial motivations for why someone wants to do this. In general, these are some of the biggest questions that I can think of and that I think are the most important. But what matters is that you just need to be honest with yourself about this process. You can't just pretend like you're doing this to be a good Samaritan. You want to help people out. But at the back end, you have some kind of offer. And so then you're integrating all these CTAs and all of these asks for people that listen to your content or watch your content and read your content, but then they kind of feel like they're just being sold to all the time. And we'll talk about that later, but that makes a huge difference, right? Actually, that would be a point that I would like to make, is that, the biggest winners that I see on social media are the ones that truly care and want to provide value for people. There are founders that I know that are starting their brands, and a lot of their motivation is literally just to make more money. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I am all for that. I think that that's, a reasonable position to take. But also, if you do it at the expense of not actually caring about the people who follow you or the people who want to learn from you or the people who feel like you're giving to them, and all you feel like at the end of the day is like, well, I want you to buy my course though, then it's going to backfire on you. There's going to be a lot of hate. There's going to be a lot of people that don't like what you do. And naturally, you're going to get a lot of hate. But one thing I would just like to bring up is that when you have a strong community of people who trust you and know what you're about, it is really hard for people to hate without getting railed by your community who is backing you up and defending you. I see this all the time. I read comments for a living. And so I see when people go in the comments and they try to hate on somebody, and all of the people that will respond being like, yo, you're a loser, like stop this. Or it's like, dude has no idea what he's talking about. It's like you saw one post, like this guy's actually a really good guy. And so when you don't focus on building the community aspect of building a personal brand, it can come at a cost to certain things. So just be honest with yourself, but know that the best in the game really do care about providing value for those people. And if you do want to monetize, you need to be super careful, because if you're only really in it to sell people and you talk about your services and your business a ton throughout your content and asking people to make purchases, they're gonna be turned off, right? Because people love to buy, we know this, right? But they hate to be sold to. So you need to keep that in the back of your mind whenever you're doing content. And to be honest, if we talk about strategy, and we're going to talk about that later, is your whole strategy for social media really should just be about awareness, right? You want to drive some of those lists building elements through your keyword automations and through other things that can get people off platform. But it's usually not in a big ask. It's usually in a small ask, and it's usually in the return for some kind of additional resource or video or some kind of checklist or any kind of lead magnet that's going to get people through the door. And that's where a lot of the selling should happen. Most selling should happen on the back end. But if you want to integrate any kind of CTAs for people to make a purchase from your product or service or whatever it is that you have directly through the platform, then yeah, you can integrate that in. But what I would recommend just off the bat is just an 80-20 principle. We'll talk about that later, but I want to make sure that we're aware about that. Here's a couple other questions that I would consider as well. And this is going to tie in at the very end, where we're going to wrap back around to the beginning of this about our expectations. So additional questions: how long is your vision for this? It's super, super common to get super hyped on this, right? As entrepreneurs, this is what we do. And I think that there's a really cool phrase I learned a while ago, which is that you go through like 3 stages as an entrepreneur. You go from uninformed optimism, right? When you're starting out, it sounds awesome. It sounds fun. You want to get started, build a business, get the website, get the LLC, all that stuff. And then you have informed pessimism. So now you realize how much work this actually takes. And once you get through that, if you persevere and you get through that stage, then on the other side of that is informed optimism. And that's where you knew what it takes. You've persevered through that. You now understand the game. And now you're starting to see the compounding results of your efforts. And that's where things get fun again. So the same applies for this. And so the question becomes, how long is your vision for this? Because if your vision is you want to have this in 6 months, you want to have this in 3 months, you want to have this in 1 year. If you're like, I just want to do this until I get to, X amount of followers and I just want to monetize and I just want to have this. Okay, whatever it is, you just need to know how long you're in for the game for. Because if I'm being honest, when we're going to talk about expectations at the end, this needs to be a marathon and not a sprint. You need to think about this differently, not as a crypto day trading type of investment strategy where it's like I can, figure out the way to hack this or know what's the next big coin that's going to drop or whatever, and then imagine you getting rich overnight. Social media is just not that way. Like, trust takes time to build, right? A famous phrase that one of my favorite pastors uses is, trust is gained in drops and it's lost in buckets. And so if you really want to do this, you need to consider how long you're willing to commit. Next question, how much time are you willing to commit to this? Or how much money are you willing to invest to save you time? So obviously this is going to take a ton of time for you to do this. But if you don't want to spend as much time doing that, then you need to ask, how much money are you willing to invest into this? And we will talk about the financials later on in this as well. Next question, are you trying to do everything by yourself? Are you trying to build an internal team, or are you trying to work with an agency? So obviously you don't have to have a decision for this like right now. You're probably just considering getting started, but it's something you need to consider because you are going to hit a point where you no longer want to either do it all yourself, or you already start off that way and you're like, I don't want to do all this myself. And you need to know, how much are you willing to invest? And we will talk about this in depth later on. So I'm just going to keep moving on for the sake of pace, but keep this question in the back of your mind. Next question, are you doing this to support an existing business or service or start something brand new? So when we talk about the different types of personal brands that I see created out there are some that are for businesses and they actually have a offer that's tied to the back end. And then there's other personal brands that I've seen where they don't have anything specifically they're trying to offer. And what this most relates to is pretty much just your ROI. If you're looking to see a financial return in a certain period of time, if you don't have an offer or something that's set up, then you're obviously not going to see a lot of it. So you might put a lot of time and effort into building something that doesn't feel like it's paying off at all. Next question, what does a successful personal brand look like for you specifically? You need to be setting your KPIs. Is it just about getting more leads for your business? It's about you wanting more followers so that you can get maybe more speaking events or networking or more engagements? Is it that you just want more traffic to your website in general? Do you have a really great funnel, but you just need to get more eyeballs into it? Is it you want to build a bigger email list? Are you trying to start a newsletter and you want to hit 10,000 users? Some people, it's not as common, but if you wanted to monetize through ads and through ad placements, then if that's the case, then is it a certain number that you want for your email list? Do you want it bigger? Do you want, as many as possible? Do you want to sell it one day? It depends on what your goals are, right? Or maybe another question or thought is that you want it to be about having a stronger community and having better engagement. There's so many different reasons for building it, and you just need to know what your measurement metrics are, because what you do not measure, you cannot manage. And if you have no idea what your KPI looks like and you're just kind of in it to do whatever, it can be very easy when you start this process to not see any of those kinds of metrics and not understand the process and then decide to quit or give up on it and be like, yeah, I kind of started personal branding and I kind of was just like, yeah, it's too much or I can't figure it out. And then you decide to bail out. And while you don't have to do personal branding, it's not like you're being forced to do this. You still have to keep an account that personal branding is becoming a popular strategy for founders in order to outcompete their competitors. Right? Most businesses have a unique mechanism, right? Something that sets them apart inside of their fulfillment process or in any of those elements that actually makes them different from what other people do. And if it is not their actual system that is unique, that can get them different results from other people, and it comes down to the person that's behind the business, then that's where your unique mechanism will fail and others will thrive. Because if I have a chocolate company like Hershey's, and Mr. Beast has a company like Feastables, and he does chocolate as well. And it comes down to they both are great tasting. Who's going to make more money? It usually comes down to either the commodity of pricing it down to where it's the cheapest option is the best. But branding has the ability to lever or leverage a higher purchase from someone because the brand has recognition. The brand has value to itself. And so as a personal brand builds that, then that reflects in the products that they do or it can reflect in the future projects that you do. Because if you decide to start another business later on, but that business doesn't have any of the experience or, been in it for 20 years or that kind of stuff, you're obviously going to be competing against other companies that have more data points, that have more experience, more touch points, all those things. So it puts you at a disadvantage. So obviously you just need to consider what it is that you're trying to measure to know what's going to work in order to be able to persevere and push through or adjust if you're not seeing those metrics being hit the way you want it to. All right, so going on to the next stage, the three main stages of personal brands that I see. There are three types in general. I don't know if I want to say stages. I think I want to say types because these are the ones that I encounter the most. And you need to figure out which one you are in the category of. Now, it can't be all three, but I need you to understand each of them independently. So number one is going to be what I call the sellers. So these are the people that directly have an offer that's tied to a service that you maybe provide already, but it has some kind of monetary gain. So this is for businesses or life coaches, consultants, training programs. Maybe it's you're an agency, B2B SaaS, course creators, infopreneurs, personal trainers, and now, which is more common, is paid communities. If you know anything about school, and the momentum that they're picking up with a lot of like individual solopreneurs. But this is definitely for the person who does want to see an ROI on their investment from socials, because this is probably an additional strategy for driving more traffic to the website, for getting, the brand built up, for getting the networking aspect where you can go and sponsor more events and speak on stages, any of that kind of stuff. But this is usually the people that have an offer already determined, whether it be from them individually or from a company that they're the founder of, and that they're using social media as a lever to increase the revenue or the awareness that it has. The next is going to be what are called builders. So these are personal brands or founders that don't necessarily have a direct offer, but they do plan on wanting to monetize at some point in time. Maybe you even have your offer picked out and you already know you want to do something, but it's just in the building stage or you have it on hold. And when I say founders, but then they don't have a personal brand, or a company that they're trying to monetize or an offer that they have, both can be true at the same time. Because I have founders that I work with that do have companies that they run, or one big company that they run, but their personal brand is not just really to market services. Because what happens is that if you put yourself into a box where, let's say that you do design services, but you're the founder of that company, well, are you trying to do content that's strictly around design services? I mean, if you're trying to pull the lever on social media to attract as many people as possible to build that list, then ideally, yes, you do want to have a bunch of that type of content in the batch of what you're doing, because you're thinking about your avatar and the person who's going to be purchasing from that company, not just random people who might have shared interest in the things that you do. So if you are a founder and you do have an offer, but you're not trying to necessarily monetize on that offer or focus on that offer, then you would still be considered a builder, because this is typically for someone like you, or for serial entrepreneurs, or for people that just don't feel like they need to have an immediate ROI on what they're doing, but they want to invest in the personal branding aspect because they see all of the benefits that come with it. This also could be that maybe you want to shift towards more about thought leadership. You want to do more speaking engagements. Maybe you eventually want to drop some books. Maybe you want to talk about other things in general. And so you don't want to be just tied down to one thing. In general, these are what we call builders. And what's nice about these is that because you don't have any strings attached, so to say, where you're trying to get someone to buy something, the resistance from people who want to follow you is lower. The resistance score for someone like a seller is a little bit higher. If we're doing a scale from 1 to 10, I'd put it between a 5 to a 6, because if people know that there's an immediate offer that people are trying to make to you and they just feel like they're being sold to, then they're like, you don't want me, you want my money, right? But if you're a builder and you don't say I want your money, then people are like, oh, okay, well, you just truly want to help me. And obviously, if you're a seller, you can navigate it in a way where you don't feel like you're that way, but it runs a higher risk depending on your strategy and how you do it. And that's super important. All right, the last one on this is what I would call creators. So these are people that are the ones that you see most of the time on social media. These are the people that literally get on content and on social platforms just to create content. They do it for fun. They do it because they enjoy it. They do it because it's just a part of their livelihood. They do it because they don't feel like there's necessarily something that they have to monetize, but it's just a hobby for them, right? And sometimes maybe the method is that they do it through YouTube, and YouTube is a way for them to technically monetize and they can make money from that. But they're not asking people to pay out of pocket for something. That's the platform that's paying them through AdSense. And so they're just doing it through retention and for people that watch their videos all the way through. And so creators are definitely going to be on the least resistance possible, because there is no ask. There is nothing that they're trying to sell. When Logan Paul first started out, he just made vlogs. He just did it for fun. He created a community that he called the Low Gang. And I am not proud of saying this, but I used to be in the Low Gang. I used to be obsessed with Logan Paul. I used to watch every single video, every single day that he dropped a vlog. I stopped everything that I was doing and I watched it, because that was just being a part of a community. And you love watching these people in long form because they're entertaining, or they're just insightful, or they're interesting, and you want to learn more from them. So if you are in that category, right, I think that you would be someone that would be maybe more like a Chamath Palihapitiya, maybe an Elon Musk, a Jason Calacanis. Like, these are the big heads that have already built very successful companies. They have other companies that they're running, but they don't necessarily say like, you need to like buy my service or go through this. They're just building those companies and they can run on themselves because they have the capital, they have the resources, they already have the network and the distribution. So they're not stressed about needing to sell. And so what they do is they just create, because that's just kind of what they do. They give their opinion pieces, they talk about different things, they engage in social activities, they do like the All In does their podcast, but there's not like an ask. They don't do mid rolls and they don't have ads. They don't, do partnerships or collaborations for companies. Like, they don't do that stuff. They literally just create. And for them, there's not necessarily like a reason to build a list, because they don't even know if they're gonna monetize that audience at some point. But they know that just by building a massive personal brand and just creating content, that it will overflow into other things, right? Because if you're Elon Musk and you start a new company and it stamps on it that it's Elon Musk, like their XAI, they can raise hundreds of millions of dollars literally just because that is who they are and people know who that person is. And so if you are a creator, you have the least resistance and you have the most advantage, but it usually means that you're not typically planning on trying to make an ROI at some point through a means where you can actually measure that, through different KPIs and different analytic structures, or whatever is the pixels, and going through the process of knowing where you're converting and where a sale is happening, right? Like, if you're not able to track that because you're Elon Musk and you're like, yeah, it just builds awareness for my stuff, but I'm not seeing like, link trees, and I'm not seeing, like UTM parameters in my links and tracking where all that stuff is coming from. They don't have that. And so the way that I want you to think about this is through a Venn diagram, but with 3 circles. Okay. So in one circle is going to be the builder, and another circle is the seller, and then the third is going to be the creator. And so I think that the combination of all 3 of those is what a personal brand needs to be for you. You need to have the mindset of the creator. You need to have the intention of the builder, and you need to have the intellect of the seller, right? The mindset is of a creator is that you're not married to money, and money is not the influence for your decisions, right? If you get to a point where you're not seeing an actual financial return, then you're okay with it. You're not freaking out. You're not stressing out that you're not making money off of this thing. And so you just do it because you also enjoy the process. So having the mindset of the creator is incredible, because it gives you a level of durability and persistence and resistance to any of the other issues that other companies might face, where they're like, well, we need this to make money for us, and if we don't, then we need to stop doing it altogether. So the mindset of the creator is super powerful for like longevity, and I encourage every single personal brand to have that. The intention side needs to be that of the builder, and you needing to understand that, like, yes, I can sell something. And so when you know that all of these platforms are rented spaces, that they aren't actually spaces that you own, that if anything happens to your account, that you still have a way of building a list off of that platform to make sure that people are not lost. If you build a following of, let's say, 1 million followers on TikTok, well, TikTok is apparently about to get banned. By the time you're listening to this episode, it might already be banned. And so if you built your entire following on that one platform and you didn't pull them off platform at all, or build a list, then you lose. You lose big, because you have to start over from scratch again. Maybe those people will go and find you on TikTok or on Instagram or YouTube, and they'll follow you there. Maybe it'll happen. But a good percentage of those people that followed you, that don't see you in their algorithm anymore, are just going to forget. And so you need to have the intention of the builder to know that this needs to be a bigger game than just making content. But you need to also have the intellect of the seller, because you need to know how to monetize when you choose to do that. And so a lot of creators, what happens is that they realize, wait, I can make money on my audience. I can do that somehow. And they go into monetization. But what they do is they do the classic thing, which is they start selling merch. They're like, buy this t-shirt, buy this hat, or buy this one product, whatever it is. but they get into the wrong spaces and they realize that they don't make great margins, they don't make a lot of profit off of it, or it's a waste of time. Or maybe they just do a bunch of collaborations and partnerships with companies, and that's fine, but there's no long-term security for that, right? Like you could be doing collaborations with your brand for other companies, but then all of a sudden you decide to take a stance on something, whether politically, whether you come up with a video that just backfires for some reason. And then all of a sudden companies are like, we don't know if we want to work with you now because you kind of have some stains on your personal brand. And we want to make sure that we are super authentic with the companies or from the individuals that we partner with for, influencer collaborations, so that we, protect our brand at all costs. And so if you are someone that is just getting into the monetization zone, like some of these creators, you fail because you're not set up for success. So you need to have the intellect to know how you're going to sell and how it even works in order for that to happen. Now, the benefit is that you probably have all three of these, right? I think that you definitely have the intellect of the seller and you know how to monetize your audience. I think that you are very aware of the intention of needing to build something off platform because you need to own the audience that you have. I think that the one that most might be challenged with is the creator mindset. And I think that's because as founders and entrepreneurs, we think through the lens of ROIs. Right? We think through the lens of, if I invest into this, what am I going to make out of this? And if you don't enjoy the process, I mean, we love business because we love what we're doing, but a lot of founders that I know don't really like doing content. They're like, I don't want to be in front of the camera. I don't like having to put my face out there. But a lot of them are being squeezed into these positions because they see what is happening with these other creators and personal brands that are coming out and these founders that are doing this. And because of that, it makes it really, really challenging for them to stick out or to stand out in their market. And so if you're being squeezed and you're forced to do this and you don't have the creator mindset, it can be really easy to either give up or put yourself in a toxic mindset where all you want to see is the ROI on it. And that's just not how this landscape works. It is a much different place. If you just want the ROI, I highly encourage you to go to ads. But even that, a lot of the agencies that I work with and the other companies that I've partnered with and individuals that I know that manage millions of dollars for their clients, all their strategy is doing is just using the best performing organic content for their ads. So at the end of the day, you're still going to have to do organic, whether you like it or not. So either you need to work on your mindset if you are someone that's stuck like that, or if you are in a better place, then you need to maintain that and protect that at all costs because it can be very dangerous and toxic if you don't. For me, I've taken more of an unconventional approach to this with my personal brand and with my social media content because there are certain limitations that happen when you only build a personal brand, quote, personal brand for your company. So for instance, there's a lot of agencies that I know and a lot of coaching programs that I know where a big focus on their strategy is like, hey, build out your personal brand. Hey, use the ad strategy that we use through your personal socials. And there's a lot of positive elements to it, right? Because people connect with faces better, you trust them more, the branding, you have a logo, it's kind of hard, you feel like you're talking to a stranger, not an individual. And so there's a lot of advantages to doing it through your personal socials. But again, if I did only social media content, that would be like the strategy I would use if I wanted to, because that would have the highest conversions for my business and for my firm and for being able to generate as much revenue as possible. But if I do that, then it makes it really challenging for me to either shift into a different market. So you would either have to vertically integrate whatever your new products are. So let's say that I built a personal brand and I did all my stuff through social media and social media growth. Then the product that I would have to drop in order for people to actually want to buy or that would relate to it would have to be either a social media management tool or a software or some AI tool or something of that nature, right? And if it wasn't that, and it was that I went to a completely different market where it's like, hey, I am actually like super interested in storage facilities and I want to build out a storage company. Or maybe it's that you want to do a software, but it's for a different space, or you want to do a coaching program, but it's for business growth and it's not just necessarily for social media. Well, if I try to promote that, then there's only so much connection that an individual that's in my following is going to make to that, right? Versus if I did the tools. If you are thinking about building a personal brand, there's just certain limitations that if you are a serial entrepreneur, you want to be careful of this because you don't want to put yourself into a box. Now, on the other side, building a personal brand, you increase your likelihood of being able to kind of just do whatever you want, because on the personal brand side, you integrate the personal, right? And so for me, what I do is I like to talk about other things that I'm interested in. I love talking about my faith because I'm a big Christian. I also love business and just talking business growth. I'm also big on families and like relationships and intentionality between those things. And so for me, it's like there's a lot of things I want to say on those topics. And by bringing that into my content strategy, the people who listen to me and like me for my business content, that also like me for my family content and also like me for potentially my faith content, then now I've put myself into a completely new market where I'm not competing with a lot of people, right? The more you show your interest in who you are, the more your audience builds. I think that Joe Rogan is probably the best example of this because he's not just the MMA guy, right? He's not just the conspiracy theory guy. He's not just the fitness guy, right? Like he has so many different elements that he likes to bring into his podcast. And of course, this is through long form, but because of that, Joe could do anything he wants. He's not restricted to only being like, I got to do something MMA wise. He loves comedy still, right? Like he can do a Netflix special or whatever it was that he did a special with, and it performs super well because he's not just that guy. So what I would say is that if you do have a company that you do want to promote and you do want to do socials for that, what it requires is having different accounts, because that's what I do, right? My King's account is strictly for my social content, and we're starting to build that out. But that's going to be strictly for generating the most qualified leads and awareness for our agency from socials. But then my personal brand is more, I want to build something separate that I can use to monetize or leverage or do for whatever later on, but I don't have any immediate need right now. So I think that there's a benefit to where if you're capable of being able to do both, then you have a strong advantage. But what just happens is if you box yourself into two different accounts and you're doing twice the amount of work, you just want to make sure that whatever your strategy is for the agency or the company that you have and doing content there, that you can exit at any point and people still want to engage with the content. So it's not always my number one strategy for clients that have a company account to only make content about them on that platform. I would integrate different faceless type content so that you can remove yourself from needing to be the face of that. So for me, it's a little bit of an unconventional approach, but I just want to make sure that that's clear because some of you guys follow my socials and you guys see what I'm doing. I want to make sure that there's no discrepancy or feeling like I'm teaching something that I'm not actually doing myself. I want to make sure that I'm walking the talk. And so if you go and look at my socials, you'll see exactly what that looks like. And I think there's an advantage to it. And because I have a team that literally does this for a living for other people, I have an advantage for being able to leverage that team for my own socials to make sure that I can manage both at the same time. And pretty much I'm just becoming a full-time content creator for my agency so that I can build a huge following for this. All right, so just to recap, you are thinking about building a personal brand. And before we even get started with the tactics and the strategy and actually building out the roadmap for how to make this happen, I think it is so important to know your why, because if you do not know your why, then it doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to last very long. You're either going to be lost, you're going to be confused, or you're going to spend months, maybe even years trying to build something that doesn't even have true roots to it. I was talking with a potential prospect the other day and was asking them, why are you even doing this? What is the actual purpose? They were thinking about, working with us and wanting to use our strategy that we use for building their companies up. They do business coaching and they have a podcast, but they want to integrate some personal branding into it. And I just asked them, I'm like, why are you doing this? What is the intention? Do you want to do this to monetize? Do you want to do this just to build an audience right now? Do you want to do it just to create and to have fun? Is it to test ideas? Is it to experiment? Is it because you feel forced? Whatever it is, you need to know exactly why you're getting into this because it's going to make the process so much easier when you do. And I know this is the most boring of all the episodes, but this is going to be the most important, as we all know, because it sets the foundation for the rest of it. All right, so that's all I have for step one. So I will see you guys in the next episode where we will go over who, which is strategizing, figuring out your core audience, and how we're going to reach them. See you guys in the next one.